Welcome to the Kill the Lion podcast. It's me, Cody Clarke. I know I've been on like a 10-month hiatus. I've been making a bunch of movies. I had to stop the podcast and focus on that. They were time sensitive, man. Don't yell at me. I had to do what I had to do, but I'm back. We have a great episode for you today. JoesSwanberg is here. You may know his movies. You should know his movies. He's made a ton of them. They're all really, really good. We're going to talk to him today. Really great guy. Also, if you like the show, and the show is back, by the way, I'm going to be doing episodes again pretty regularly. $2 per month, killthelionfilms.com. You can support the show and support the studio. We make movies. That's what we primarily do. But we do the podcast as well because we know you love it, and we love it too. $2 per month. That's the support that we want from you, that you should give to us. And now, JoesSwanberg. All right, Joe, good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Nice to be a guest on your show. I appreciate it.
So I've been watching a ton of your movies lately. Basically, over the past couple months, me and my girlfriend, Chloe, we make movies together, and we've been digesting your entire filmography pretty much, going to various streaming sites and finding like ones that are probably defunct and like doing free trials and like this, that, and the other to assemble some sort of like full thing of your filmography through that way.
I know many have become quite difficult to find. It's interesting.
It happens, but it seems like you're trying to remedy that. Now, if you go to JoesSwanbergcom, you can see a lot of these hard to find ones. I'll let you take over from there, but it seems like that's the way to go to see a lot of your stuff.
Yes, I'm hoping to make that be the case. As the rights revert back to me, at this point, I self-finance so many of my films that I just own the rights. Some of them had handshake distribution agreements with like Factory 25 and various films floated around to different streaming platforms. But yeah, many of them never quite received a real release. I'm kind of gathering them now on my website. I've had JoesSwanbergcom since, I don't know, 2000 or 2001 or something. And it's mostly been dormant, or it had like one line of text on there. So this year I finally decided it would be a good idea just to start warehousing the old films as the rights come back to me, and also just to use it to start to gather really great short films by other filmmakers, hopefully to salvage a lot of the stuff that maybe is DVDs and other physical media are becoming increasingly rare, or just being traded amongst hardcore collectors and things like that.
So basically, people go to JoesSwanberg.com, and for, I guess, $5 or so a month, they can stream.
Yeah, there's like $5 a month or $50 a year. And I have maybe 9 of my features on there right now, something like that, plus every music video and weird short and some other commissioned projects. And yeah, just a kind of catch-all place. So yeah, I figure like even if somebody just wants to pop in for a month for $5, they can track down a lot of films they might otherwise be spending like $2.99 per rental or something, or signing up for some, obscure streaming service. So yeah, we'll see what happens. It's sort of like in its soft launch, first month of launch right now. And I have plans for it. I have a lot of short films that are going to go up in April on there, as well as right now all of Frank V. Ross's films, which have also been occasionally hard to find or track down. And hopefully each month there will be some different filmmakers whose work I'll highlight. And some of the stuff will just kind of enter the permanent collection and be available to stream for the whole year. And other stuff, I think, I'll just put it up for a month and then pull it down.
Well, I've watched pretty much everything that's on there. I think there's only a couple things I haven't watched yet, and I've enjoyed everything you've thrown up. And there's some really obscure stuff that I didn't even know you made. Like, it seems like there aren't even like IMDb pages for some of these shorts that you've done over the years. How much unearthed like stuff really is there that just has never seen the light of day at all?
I'm still going through things. It's interesting. Like I have, most of my career is sitting on hard drives in boxes. Many of these hard drives I have not even plugged in since, 2006 or seven. So I don't know. I think I've got most of the major stuff. Like, though I did a web series called Young American Bodies, 4 seasons of that web series, which is, it used to broadcast on ifc.com. That show's kind of fallen by the wayside or become difficult to see, so that'll end up going up there. And maybe other things that I forget about, funny shorts that I just was goofing around with friends and making, and other tests. A lot of times before I did features, I just did little test shorts and other ways to put actors on camera and things like that. So I would say over the next few months, as I dig around these old hard drives, maybe some other super rare will be unearthed. But primarily, I think most of my stuff is up there, though I think I get the rights to Hannah Takes the Stairs back from IFC later this year. And maybe I get Nights and Weekends back the following year. So I think some other features will start landing there as well.
Well, congratulations on any time you get the rights back. Both you and I, we share kind of the belief that filmmakers should try at least to own their own stuff as much as possible and build that big catalog that will always kind of have worth and have something to it. That's something that's super important to me. I own all of my films. I feel like every couple films I'll get tempted by some distribution deal, and then I'll like read the fine print and realize like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that whatsoever. I just want to own my stuff, even if I don't make a dime in the immediate,
Yeah, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the bundling of these rights is also valuable, So as you own all your own stuff, it's conceivable that you can reach a point where you can do a really good distribution deal that makes sense and pays you well if you have libraries and collections of films. So I think filmmakers are always putting themselves in a good place by owning their own work, or at least being in control of the distribution. It's an old school model, I feel like in the 80s, maybe 70s and 80s, it was common knowledge, and a lot of really great filmmakers owned their own catalog and distributed their own work. But that was also the days of institutional licensing, and I think you could, rent a print for a screening for $250, and physical 16 millimeter prints were moving around and things like that. So I just think the internet has changed the landscape so much that it's hard for filmmakers to envision that old method. But I still think it's pretty exciting and interesting to just connect the distribution to every other aspect. It's like if you're going to do everything yourself anyway, from financing to making the film, distribution feels like just another part of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with more and more streaming services are opening themselves up to a model where the artist retains the full rights to their work. It's just on that streaming platform as well, whether it be Amazon or smaller streaming platforms. They're kind of meeting you halfway, I found, which is just wonderful. I mean, that's kind of what it should be, and I'm happy it's increasingly more like that.
Yeah, I agree. In the early days, I was really surviving off of the filmmaking and the distribution deals with small DVD companies, and with IFC for a stretch of several of my films were actually keeping me alive. Like I was making these films for $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, and then selling them for a little bit more than they cost, and paying the rent and putting any extra into the next film. So I was glad I did those deals. I never regretted the distribution deals, but as the rights expire, several of these deals were for stretches between 7 and 15 years. As I reach this point where the rights are expiring, it just makes sense to me to pull them back rather than re-up. And also, a lot of new avenues are emerging. Like I'm sensing that physical media is coming back in a big way. And as the streaming content gets stratified amongst all these different companies that are launching their own streaming services, and they stop being kind of grouped together in a Netflix or something like that. A lot of people are realizing they just want to own physical media of the films they love and don't want to have to deal with the films, popping around every 2 years between different streaming services. So I'm optimistic that while that market probably won't grow to its late 90s size ever again, it will become a more sustainable avenue where filmmakers can do runs of, 1,000 or 2,000 Blu-rays and actually make some money off that.
Yeah, I'm a huge physical media guy myself too. I worked at video stores for many years, and when I see kind of how streaming services are run, where like, they'll even put out notices where they're like, you better watch Ghostbusters this week or it's going to disappear or something, and it's like, if a video store ever treated movies like that, they would be the worst video store in town and nobody would go there. Just the thought that like, oh, we're just going to get rid of all these movies that the rights expire to or whatever. Like the idea of like something just goes on a shelf, it stays there until it's rented. That makes more sense to, I think, people's brain when it comes to movies. Even though video stores have gone by the wayside, I think it's something that could come back. And I can kind of sound like an old fogey in a way when I talk like that, but I do think that physical media, much like vinyl, can have a resurgence. I think video stores are libraries, are vital to communities, and probably the best video store near me is the public library, where I can go in and rent 10 DVDs at a time for free, basically. I would love to see libraries become more like video stores, or even build out in a way where they kind of look like a video store even, and just kind of play up that aspect, because I do think that engaging with movies in that physical way, where you're holding something and you're placing something into a player and you're looking at the box art and you're treating it like an object that actually exists, I think that brings something to the experience. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit here. You have a would you call it a video store? Would you call it a theater? Is it a bit of both? You have a place called Analog in Chicago?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. It's certainly a functional video store. People come in and check out movies all the time. But we also do several screenings each month. And I've just built a little, it's like a storefront micro cinema is the best way to describe it. I can comfortably seat 35 or 40 people. It's quite small. It's couch and chair style seating. It's not like movie theater seating. And I'm primarily engaging in programming in the theater that is thematic each month. Like in January, our program was an Earth in Crisis series looking at disaster films. We showed Dante's Peak, but we also showed some like late 70s environmental films kind of claiming that if we didn't act by the year 1999, Earth would be uninhabitable. Just all the kind of constant scare films mixed with Hollywood imaginations of. We showed Melancholia, Lars von Trier's Melancholia. It's not like a typical movie theater. We're not. We don't have weekly programming. We don't show first run movies. It's much more eclectic than that, and much more in dialogue with the video store. But I had a real desire just to recreate a space like that. I have two kids. I have an 11-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and neither of them had ever even been in a video store. Like they have just completely grown up in a streaming era. And so I think to some degree I wanted to just create the experience, not only for them, but even for a lot of people in their 20s. And I also think, there's like a feeling that I have to want to encourage people to slow down and be more deliberate, like the schizophrenic feeling of surfing through streaming platforms where you watch 10 minutes of something and fast forward a bit and then skip around and you're texting on your phone while you're half watching the movie. And, I fell victim to all of this myself. I used to really consider movie viewing like a holy experience. And I just found more and more that I mostly like half watched movies, unless I went to the theater, where I forced myself into an environment where I had to pay attention. And so with the video store, it's a much more deliberate act to leave your house, come to my place, choose a movie or two, and you kind of live with those choices. And so I noticed that I'm watching a lot more movies since I opened the video store, and it's VHS only. You know, there's sort of like a interesting barrier to entry just because I don't think many people own VCRs anymore. But something about popping the tape in, the physical act of it is making me make different choices. And also I'm sticking with movies, you know, there's something that's less fast forwardy and forgettable about it.
Yeah, I have a bunch of VCRs. I have a bunch of VHS tapes. I find that like one of the things people don't realize about, you know, watching VHS is that it doesn't look like the crappy version you see on YouTube. So like when you convert it to digital and you upload it to YouTube and they have that crappy compression that they put on it, etc., it really doesn't look at all like when you watch it on, you know, a proper CRT TV, and you can come away from the experience watching something that looks pretty much as good as a DVD or a Blu-ray. It's just a different type of resolution. It has a different warmth and quality to it. I think people get scared about delving into VHS stuff because they think, oh, it's going to look really muddy and it's going to look really crappy. And yes, there are VHS tapes like that, but like I'll watch like I'll find like brand new unopened VHS tapes at like Goodwill or whatever, and I'll bring them home and I'll pop them in, and they look incredible because I'm watching them on a CRT television. I have it calibrated right, and it has this color and quality to it. You know, for one thing, I think the blacks look a lot better on a CRT television than on, you know, an LCD TV or whatever. There's just some quality to them on a CRT that I find super desirable. I remember watching not too long ago, like a non-anamorphic DVD of Darren Aronofsky's Pi on a CRT, and it blew my mind. Like the whites and the blacks and just the resolution of it. And this is completely, you know, non-anamorphic early DVD. It looked incredible. It looked better than I'd ever seen the movie before. So I think if people understand that it's, you know, it's a different experience, but it's not a worse experience, I think more people might be prone to just picking up a cheap VCR off of Craigslist, maybe for free or whatever, and just getting some tapes, getting a cheap TV. I haven't paid for a single TV in my house. I have like 3 CRTs that were just, you know, free Craigslist pickups or whatever, and they're fantastic. So I think different is the key here.
A lot of work never migrated to other formats either. You know, at the video store, I'm focusing on mostly on movies that are not available on DVD or Blu-ray. You know, a lot of stuff during the video store boom of the 80s and 90s was going straight to VHS. A lot of good indie stuff, you know, maybe had an extremely limited theatrical run, but quite a nice VHS release because of the constant expansion of the number of video stores. And so a lot of those films, when it came time to pivot to DVD, were just not commercially viable. You know, whoever owned the rights to them could not justify going back to the original film elements and rescanning them at higher quality. And so, you know, the VHS release ends up being the end of the road. And it's also a lot of these issues were music licensing issues. So you have some pretty major filmmakers like John Sayles and trying to think who else fell into this trap. Maybe some of them, Cameron Crowe's early projects, things that had really great soundtracks, which in an era where they could not imagine DVD or Blu-ray or streaming, they wrote their contracts in such a way that the rights were given only for VHS. So they were, again, in a position where relicensing the music for DVD just didn't make financial sense. And so it's not even obscure indies and docs and things like that didn't migrate to DVD. A lot of relatively mainstream films just couldn't justify relicensing a Beach Boys song or a Rolling Stones song or something like that. And so you just kind of get the final home of these films being VHS. And I agree, the quality is totally fine. I mean, this is not like watching a fifth generation bootleg. These were like major, well done releases at the time.
Yeah, and also when you mentioned bootleg, it just reminded me. There's a great Twitter account. I forget the name of it right now, but it's been archiving like weird clips from VHS bootlegs of like movies that came out around like 25 years ago or so. So like just digitizing, like those ones where people would bring a camcorder to the movie theater and just record it that way. So you get these weird moments where like you hear a crowd actually laughing at a moment in some movie, and it becomes this time capsule. And that's something I never would have considered about, VHS bootlegs at the time, which of course were ubiquitous to me living in New York City as a kid. But you just see people reacting, and you see how people reacted to movies, and you never would have found that out otherwise if somebody hadn't brought a camcorder into some random theater and tried to make a buck.
I know, it's so funny to imagine. Yeah, I have a few of those myself where you can see people's heads in the foreground.
It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, it's like a weird like anthropological version of like MST3K or something. Like it's
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I want to transition to talking about your own stuff. First of all, I have a confession to make. I avoided mumblecore for a really long time. I like made it a point, like when I started making movies, for some reason I was like arbitrarily like, I don't want to be doing what these other guys are doing, without even knowing what you guys were doing. Like honestly, like I bought into all the frankly bullshit about what this movement or this group of filmmakers were doing. Like when I started out making movies, my first feature film was on a DSLR. So I missed that whole kind of late DV era that you guys were, making movies with. And I just kind of like had this arbitrary thing, was like, I hate the look of that. I feel like, these filmmakers that are being praised, they're just like there with their camcorders and they don't care about what they're doing. I bought into like all the fucking bullshit. There was so much like weird ideas of what you and Bujalski and the Duplass brothers were doing.
Yeah, for sure.
It didn't really reflect what the actual films were. And then, over the years, very recently, I went back and, I watched Funny Haha for like the first time ever and was like, that's a really fucking good movie. And then I saw like Baghead, and then I saw Hannah Takes the Stairs, and I was like, fuck, these are actually really good. And I finally got what I'd been deprived of. And I that happens in film. You come up with assumptions about certain directors or certain time periods, and then you realize there's like a plethora of stuff you would connect to. So I've been seeing this kind of Venn diagram crossover that I didn't realize was there between, the stuff that I wanted to do cinematically and the stuff that y'all were doing cinematically. And of course, everything, kind of Venn diagram crossovers with work. But it feels like there was this cloud of like the idea of what mumblecore was, which it's a very strange thing.
Yeah, I remember it well. I mean, yeah, for sure. But I honestly have to say, I probably would have had the same reaction you did, and did to a wave of early 2000s stuff that I felt I wanted to distance and separate myself from because it was trendy or something at the time, So I think your instincts are totally valid, and there's a lot of stuff out there too. You have to pick and choose your battles. If you read a few articles about mumblecore and it sounds annoying, there's like 10 other types of movies you could go spend your time watching. So, I'm glad that you cycled back around and connected with the stuff, but also I don't think, none of us were really, we were sort of swept along with the mumblecore label and the accusations, the sort of feeling and vibe around these movies that they were lazy, unambitious, that the aesthetics were haphazard. And so, and some of that was true. So it was interesting at the time. I mean, I'll say just from my end, because I can't really speak for the Duplasses or Wojciechowski or Aaron Katz or any of the other people that were like immediately lumped into this. But from my end, you know, when you don't have famous movie stars in your movie or any other means of promoting them, the mumblecore label was a double-edged sword. Like, I think it was extremely helpful in getting the word out about the movies, but also it was awkward to be the butt of so many jokes. You know, it was an easy entire group of movies to dismiss at the time, and many people did. So obviously, most of the filmmakers who were kind of part of that first wave of mumblecore are now like really big commercial filmmakers. I mean, I think the Duplass brothers produce almost exclusively like HBO and other like big budget content. Greta is obviously one of the biggest directors in Hollywood right now. Lena Dunham and Barry Jenkins and all these people are like huge award-winning filmmakers. It's interesting. I mean, it ended up being a movement that produced quite commercial filmmakers. But at the time, it was complicated to imagine that if you liked The Puffy Chair, you would also like Hannah Takes the Stairs. You know, I don't think that is necessarily true. But it didn't make much sense either to spend any time railing against each other, you know, or sort of saying like, hold on a second, I'm not like these guys. You know, it's like we sort of had nothing else going on. I mean, it made sense to just kind of ride the mumblecore wave, but I think it spit most of us out a lot more on the commercial side of the industry.
Yeah, I think too, like, you know, in the certain times when my films have been written about or reviewed or whatever, I've looked at like reviews, and you know, it's an old saying that like you never realize how bullshit the news is until you're written about yourself and you see how bullshit it is about yourself, and then you extrapolate that to everything else you've read and realize, oh, it's all kind of like amorphously wrong in certain places. When I would see how my films might be misread, I think that kind of, you know, helped me to realize that certain films I might have dismissed without even watching them, I might be getting just some random other person's read that has nothing to do with what my experience would be with the film or whatever. And also like the lines, the arbitrary lines are a little amorphous and weird as far as like what mumblecore would be. Because I feel like Blair Witch Project, if that had come out like 10 years later, it would be called like mumblecore or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's people arguing and it's handy cam and whatever, you know, like that would have gotten lumped into that too or whatever. So
yeah,
that's proof that like what you guys were doing kind of pre-existed what you were doing in certain ways, because all cinema is kind of incestuous in that way and seeps into previous incarnations and whatnot. And, you know, clearly that wasn't the way it was being presented to me at the time. That steered me away from it. But also, you know, I'm kind of glad in a weird way that I was steered away from it, because I just focused on my own thing. You know, it was just like I made my movies. I figured out what my voice was. You know, it led me in the direction where, you know, I have no regrets about, you know, dismissing mumblecore. But I'm glad that I found your films. I feel like your films in particular, I've really connected deeply with. You know, it feels like almost like your filmography is itself an anthology, much like your series Easy is an anthology.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something deliberate? Is that how you treat your filmography, or have you treated it like that at certain time periods? I know you made like 7 films in a year at one point.
Yeah.
Do you view yourself as like this person that has created this anthology? Does it all kind of seep together? Because as I was watching it, I had that same feeling as like, you know, when I was in high school watching all the Woody Allen movies or all the whoever movies, and I could see everything seeping into each other. I could see themes emerge and reemerge, and, you know, one movie means more because you saw this other movie that maybe came later or came before it, etc. Is that a conscious thing on your part that you want to create a body of work that kind of can be explored like that?
Yeah, I think that it always occurred to me that there would be, especially because I was working so quickly, that each of these movies was kind of a chapter or something. They were stacked right on top of each other, and there were years that I was making more than one film each year. And so I was not precious about them. They each felt like their own project, but it also was built into the structure that I was working with, a lot of the same actors over and over from project to project. Obviously, if I'm working with the same people in quick succession, a lot of the ideas are going to bleed between the projects. And so, I just felt like, I don't know, like stacking bricks in the wall of cinema, just kind of like adding my little corner to what was going on. And I had my own preoccupations, subject matter I was interested in, styles that I wanted to try. But for the most part, they all just feel kind of like my movies, like even when I am dabbling with genre conventions or with the last several features, like shooting on film with bigger actors and things like that, I just still am myself. So at the end of the day, I'm on set, curious about the same types of things, investigating the same thematic subject stuff. And so I think over the course of the whole time, it would be really easy to look at all my movies like short stories in an anthology collection or something, like each able to be viewed alone, but also it would be interesting to watch 5 of them and see that there are obvious connection points and crossovers and things.
Well, I can confirm that it is very enjoyable, because I some of these nights me and Chloe have been watching like 3 or 4 of your movies in a row, and they just kind of blend in together, and they just are so enhanced by each other. My favorite film of yours that I've watched, and I've watched all of them, is Drinking Buddies. And if I looked at the poster and I looked at the cover and I didn't know that you made it or whatever, I'd be like, fuck this movie. Like, look at these like happy, pretty people and like all this. It's just like everything that would turn me off. And then I threw it on and I was just like, all right, well, I probably won't like this one. And it's fucking perfect. It's a perfect movie. Like, I just adore that movie head to toe. Everything about it. Everybody is the best I've ever seen them. The flow of it, everything, it just comes together in this way that really, really worked for me. I love that it's had so much success because clearly, I'm not the target demographic for the poster or the art of it, but it's reached a fuck ton of people and also reached me too. So clearly it's doing something right.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. Well, I really like it too. I mean, I'm very proud of that movie. And yeah, to me, it was in that sweet spot where it ends up being more commercial because it has famous actors in it and maybe looks a little more conventional than the other stuff. But also, it's totally one of my movies. There's nothing, there's no area during the production or in the filmmaking where I was like, well, really, I would want to do this, but I'm going to do this other thing because I think it's a more commercial choice, or I think it's going to make the movie feel bigger or something. Like, I just made exactly the movie I wanted to make. And those performers are just so good. And Ben Richardson, who shot the film, is just so good. Like, everybody was just doing great work. And so, yeah, we ended up with this movie that I think does connect. And I think with the marketing and the idea of promoting it with a certain type of poster and a certain kind of trailer and artwork, for me, was based on the premise that someone like you would find the film via cinephile channels anyway, and that the harder audience to even try and reach was a more mainstream, non-cinephile, normal movie-going audience, and that a conventional poster and a conventional campaign was going to give us a shot with them, and that we already had a shot with cinephiles who had stuck with me. Drinking Buddies is my 14th feature, so by that point, it was like anybody who's still with me is going to see Drinking Buddies regardless of what the poster looks like, but that hopefully we could lure in a much wider group of people with a more conventional looking movie. And I hope that it functions on that level too, Certainly when it came out, like, it was interesting because Twitter was becoming an interesting way to sort of like monitor a normie audience, like I didn't really know prior to like lurking on Twitter how else I would just know what teenagers thought about my movies, short of paying for a focus group or something. And I've never done anything like that. So when the movie was released, I was just kind of like lurking around on Twitter, and it was so interesting how many teenagers absolutely hated Drinking Buddies. Like, got drawn into the movie because of Anna Kendrick or Olivia Wilde, or because they were New Girl fans and they loved Jake Johnson. You know, like, they felt so tricked and betrayed by that movie. And so many of them were tweeting that it was the worst movie they had ever seen. And I just thought, first of all, this is so cool that so many of these teenagers saw one of my movies. And then I also thought, this is probably one of the only like actual independent films they've ever seen. You know, like, it did not have the trappings of like a low budget Chicago indie film, but in fact is a low budget Chicago indie film. And so I derived so much pleasure. I mean, obviously I wish they would have liked the film. I didn't enjoy that they hated it or that they felt like they had a bad time. But on the other hand, I just thought that it was so cool that they were exposed, you know, that maybe someone who just kind of like only watched multiplex level wide studio releases thought that this was one of those, and ended up accidentally consuming indie filmmaking.
Yeah, that's always one of my favorite experiences when I make a movie and I get to watch it be somebody's first weird movie of a particular type. Whereas like I feel like I'm continuing a dialogue that like existed way before me as far as cinema goes.
Yeah.
And then I get to be somebody's entry point, you know, positively or negatively. It's a beautiful thing to see. And that's definitely happened to me with some of my stuff where it was just too weird and too strange for somebody's first foray into whatever I was doing. I love that aspect.
I do too. I mean, it reminds me of being a high school student with my first few weird movies, you know, like, these were life-changing experiences. I mean, I consumed a certain kind of mainstream content probably up until late junior high or early high school, and then started venturing, you know, into like different sections of the video store or coming across foreign films on TV. And, you know, it's like eating weird food or something like that. You might end up really liking that food, but the first couple bites are always going to be a little jarring. And but it's so important. I mean, you can't get to the other side without the first couple bites. And so it is so neat to kind of feel like, you know, even if someone is horrified by what they see, you're still like occupying some funny place in their brain where they're like, I hate that movie. That movie is so weird. And yeah, then maybe like 10 years later, 20 years later, they're like, oh yeah, that movie's not weird at all. I've seen like a million movies like that now. But at the time, it just felt so different.
Yeah, I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, so I always think about it in terms of like heels and faces and like the people you boo and the people you cheer and stuff. So I feel like, you know, in the immediate you can boo a movie and then 10, 20 years later down the line, you're like, that guy was probably one of the best wrestlers of all time.
Yeah.
That movie meant a lot to me. And I didn't even realize it at the time. I like sneaking into people's psyches. That's
I totally agree.
Fun aspect.
Yeah, yeah. That movie for me was Gummo.
Oh yeah.
You know, like I was already working at a video store. I was already a total young cinephile. You know, the day I turned 16, I went and applied for a job at Hollywood Video and just was in love with movies and desperately wanted to work at a video store. I felt like that is what you do, you know. And Gummo came through in like 97. Maybe I had already been working at the video store for a year, considering myself like a real indie film hound and cinephile at this point. And I was like, all right, cool. This like new indie film Gummo. And I rented it the day it came in and I hated it. I just thought, God, this movie sucks so bad. This isn't even a movie. Like, what the fuck am I even watching right now? And I told all my friends, like, don't bother with this movie. It's terrible. Like, spare yourself. I hated it. I could, I barely could even call it a movie. Like, I don't even know what it is, but it's bad. And I held that opinion for years afterwards. And then I was in college, flipping through TV, and the house I was living at the time had the independent film channel, and some piece of gummo was on, and it was like all the performers singing the Buddy Holly song, and it just completely caught my attention. And I watched for a little bit, and then I was like, oh my God, this is gummo. And I just kept watching, and I then just like probably picked it up in the middle and watched through the end of the film and was like, whoa, I really liked everything I just saw. Like, I can't believe. And then I, rewatched the movie and was like, man, I really like this movie. I can't believe I spent so many years trash talking it, like calling it terrible, thinking the movie sucked. Like, I'm now like completely on the opposite side. Like, not only do I think it's good, I really like it. And yeah, it's just so interesting. Like, all that needed to happen was I needed to just mature and grow up a little bit, and then suddenly the exact same movie just hit me on such a different wavelength.
Yeah, Harmony Korine for me, I came around to liking his stuff mostly through YouTube clips. Because like I'd sit down and I'd watch something like Gummo or Julian Donkey Boy, I'd be like, what the fuck is this? And I'd just turn it off. And over the years, I would just like look at like random YouTube clips out of curiosity from like Gummo or Julian Donkey Boy. And I'd be like, all right, well, that scene was amazing.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just seeped in, and it took a while. And I feel like Spring Breakers was the movie of his that I adored. And then it just flipped everything with me completely. I saw that one. It just clicked with me 110%. And then something like that happens, and you just kind of like immediately, like something opens up in you consciousness wise, and you just accept everything else by the filmmaker. Like you just get it finally or something. It's like a Rosetta Stone or something that just translates everything else about the filmmaker. You mentioned seeing that on IFC channel. Something I talk about a lot is how good IFC channel was back in the day. That's where I saw Hard Eight. That's where I watched all those episodes of Dinner for Five and everything.
Yeah. I used to love that show. Yeah.
Oh, such a good show. And I learned so much. I learned, that was my film school. That and working at a video store was stuff like Dinner for Five and whatnot, and IFC channel and all that.
Yep.
In recent years, it's so weird what's happened to that channel where they just play like Arrested Development reruns, and they play like...
Yeah, they show Ridley Scott movies and stuff. I mean, it's like, I feel like so often, like, it wouldn't surprise me if I was watching IFC and they were showing Top Gun. It's like...
I think they have. I think they've played a lot of stuff like that, and it's just a completely different channel. It's very strange because to me, that was like this channel that I was so grateful for as far as like finding great, weird, independent stuff that I never would have given the time of day otherwise.
They had John Pearson's show Split Screen on there. I know. I discovered Kaveh Zahidi's filmmaking on IFC. They were showing In the Bathtub of the World. It really was, programmed chock full of actual low-budget American independent filmmaking. And so was the Sundance Channel back then, too. And, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the films became mainstream enough that it was more lucrative to do Netflix and HBO licensing, and that the independent film channel couldn't compete, so it needed to pivot, or whether audiences were increasingly not tuning into low budget filmmaking. But I would flag that like the primary change in that whole situation had to do with the increasing mainstream visibility of independent films. Like the era that you're talking about, where you would come across those movies on IFC, was also not an era where the Sundance Film Festival would primarily consist of movies starring major Hollywood movie stars. Like, independent film now is just less expensive Hollywood. I'm even guilty of making those films. You know, my last several movies have major Hollywood movie stars in them, even though we're making maybe like what you would consider still like in the lineage of American independent filmmaking or whatever. Like, you know, I still am doing movies that aren't close to like 1980s or 90s American indie filmmaking, where you would have like entire casts of unrecognizable actors, movies shot on Bolexes or, you know, like the cheapest 16 sync cameras, and, you know, all the cracks were showing. Like, these films were just clearly homemade, handmade, but exceptional, interesting, cool movies. And so, you know, IFC was programming that kind of stuff, but I just think it becomes too tempting to show the bigger movies with the bigger stars. And so it's almost to the point now where the kinds of films that would have been on IFC are playing the festival circuit now and then going on to platforms like Mubi or, I don't know, some of the more like boutique streaming sites, and that they couldn't even really like compete on cable television anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the kind of distinction and the kind of tiers to what constitutes the independence of a particular film, because I kind of came up with a term to describe it for my own self, which was truly independent. Because I felt like I had to underscore the fact that like the movies I was making, I'm kind of just making them on my own. You know, they're more build the wall than they are drinking buddies.
Yeah.
There are tiers to what an independent film is. It feels like at a certain point, the term independent became indie, and then the second it was indie, it was more a look rather than a actual approach to creation. Like, it was, you know, somebody with particular glasses or somebody in particular outfit or something. And once it became that, it could be co-opted by the ostensible enemy, the mainstream or whatever.
Yeah, it's worth being realistic about that. I mean, it is you need the designations, because especially if you consume a lot of films, if someone tells you that, you know, that they're going to see an indie film, that is now a really meaningless descriptor and could encompass an incredibly wide range of projects, you know. And even a festival film, which used to signify a certain type of independence and low budget, maybe experimental or challenging type of work, like also, you know, sort of has been deprived of any specificity by the like huge commercial nature of indie. I watched it happen. I mean, I was not even necessarily part of the independent film world as that was going down, but as a high school student in the 90s, reading, you know, Premiere and Entertainment Weekly and things like that, and just being like, or Filmmaker magazine, which was kind of like covering a lot of the what you would call like truly independent filmmaking. I saw, you know, the sort of like Sundance Film Festival as a brand and a concept go from this like discovery zone of all these tiny little movies you never heard of to like a celebrity party each year. And increasingly the cast of those films was made up of television stars and other huge movie stars who thought it was like a good career move to make an indie film, you know? And it was wild. I mean, it was good for a lot of people. I think a lot of filmmakers made more money than they would have otherwise by being around at that time and part of that scene. But we witnessed, you know, sort of like ultimately where it led. And, it, you know, it's kind of led to a place where what we used to call the Independent Film Channel is now just called IFC. And it's like much more like MTV than it is like an outlet for, you know, like discovery, film discovery or something.
Yeah. The place I'm seeing a lot of, you know, truly independent stuff these days is basically just YouTube. You know, people will throw up their movies completely free, and people will watch them and discover them and be refreshed by the fact that like, oh, this isn't a vlog. This is actually something substantial.
Well, that's what I did with Build the Wall. Yeah, I just put it on the internet for free, and I figured like, why would I even attempt to compete in the commercial landscape with this project? This project was a labor of love. I made it with my friends, by myself. It doesn't make sense to try and chase a distribution deal or license it to TV or something. Like, it just feels right to just make the film available and make the spirit around it to try and have the maximum amount of people see it rather than make the maximum amount of money.
Yeah. There's a quote, you've probably heard this quote before, I don't know if you have, but from Jean Cocteau, which is, film will only ever be an art form when its materials are as inexpensive as pen and paper.
Yeah.
And that's something that was super motivational to me starting out, and has been something that I keep thinking back to throughout my career. I love that you did something like Build the Wall, which is really just you and your friends and the wall being built in your friend's backyard, and something created based off that. I would love to know, how much was that just kind of like a coincidence of like, oh, hey, my friend let me know that like this thing is being constructed in his backyard. Let's do a film about it. Was it planned out in a completely inorganic way? How does the actual physicality of coming together to make that little movie come to be? Like, what's the logistics of it?
Yeah. Well, it went like this. Jane Addams, who I have collaborated with a lot over the last 10 years, I was in Los Angeles for the release of season 3 of Easy. We had some screenings and some pressings going on. And one of those nights I was hanging out with Jane, and she said, Kent Osborne, who also stars in Build the Wall, works in animation. Like, he was the head writer on Adventure Time, and he also wrote for SpongeBob SquarePants and some big shows like that. He had left Los Angeles, moved to Vermont, and was living out there. And I don't have social media or anything, but Jane was saying to me, I've been looking at Kent's Instagrams and kind of following his life in Vermont. I think we should make a movie out there. I think there's something interesting to do there. And Jane and Kent and I had worked together previously on a movie called All the Light in the Sky, which Jane stars in and Kent sort of had a supporting role in. But they knew each other. Also, I had made a film called Uncle Kent when Kent had turned 40, and I realized that Kent was going to be turning 50. So that conversation with Jane happened in May, and I immediately said, that's a great idea. I do think we should all go to Vermont and make a film. Let me just check in with Kent and see if he feels up for that. And so I called Kent. He said he would love to. And I called my friend Kevin Buersdorf, one of my oldest collaborators. He and I started working together on my very first film, Kissing on the Mouth. And then he was one of the leads and major collaborators on LOL. He did sound on Hannah Takes the Stairs. He's just been there since the very beginning. He also said he would love to come collaborate. So, we put the pieces together first. I went out to Vermont and met up with Kevin Buersdorf, and me, Kent, and Kevin spent 2 or 3 days together outlining, brainstorming, just kind of talking about what we could do. Kent showed me his life out there so that I could picture and imagine what locations we would have, what other friends might pop into the movie. And we landed on the idea that Kent would be turning 50. Kev had sort of drunkenly made this birthday promise to him that he would build him a stone wall for his 50th birthday. And that in the interim, Kent had forgotten about that conversation with Kevin and invited his female friend out, hoping to have a kind of sexy, fun birthday weekend with her. And then, all 3 of them end up there at the same time, and Kev is kind of cramping their style, or sort of in the way a little bit of what was supposed to be a romantic weekend. So, that's basically what we knew going in. Everybody flew into Vermont and we just started shooting. I mean, there was no script. There was no written down outline. We shot the film in like 5 or 6 days in chronological order. Crew was me and my friend Amanda Brinton, who had worked on Easy and some other stuff with me. She came out and just sort of helped with sound and was a jack of all trades, like whenever we needed an extra set of hands. And it was so fun, I mean, I think coming off of 3 seasons of making a Netflix series with a huge crew and plenty of money and famous actors and all of that. I really wanted to challenge myself and ask, like, do I still like making tiny little projects by myself? And the answer was yes. I mean, I still love it. I am really proud of Build the Wall. I think it's a really cool movie. And yeah, it totally like reignited my passion. You know, it was so fun to drop all the infrastructure and challenges of working on a bigger scale and just go back to doing everything myself. We moved so quickly, you know, like I didn't feel that the film was compromised in any kind of way. We just embraced reality, used all the real things we had access to, and made the film for, you know, probably $7,000 or $8,000, something like that.
It's a wonderful movie. I really, really enjoy that one. I think it's one of my favorites of your stuff, and it was really encouraging to me to see you go back to that, you know, space of just a film with your friends, you know, no permission from anyone, just kind of just doing it and getting together and all that, because that's what I do, and that's what filmmaker friends of mine do, and that's what we really love and we really find fun. And then, you know, I'll see a lot of filmmakers that could do that, but just don't do that. And you're a filmmaker that kind of has your toes in two different waters, and I really appreciate that. You get the value of just making a movie with your friends, and I don't think you'll ever forget that. I think you'll always do, you know, wherever your career takes you, you'll always do stuff like Build the Wall and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, so many filmmakers don't. I mean, that I think was another reason why I really wanted to go do that. A lot of my friends say, oh yeah, I'm making this bigger stuff right now, but you know, I really just want to do like tiny movies with my friends. And they never do, you know, they just sort of exist then in a landscape where years pass where they're trying to get films made, and they never just say fuck it and go off and do it. And I feel like I didn't know that. I didn't know whether I would be like that or whether I would actually just go do it. And so I kind of had maybe a little bit to prove to myself as well, just to say that's not just going to be all talk, you know, like I actually am going to go make the movie.
To touch on what you said, I want to, you know, for any filmmakers listening at home that are big or small or whatever, something that I found super encouraging was a friend of mine, Joel Haver, who's a filmmaker. He made a movie called Pretend That You Love Me that's on YouTube. It's been watched 500,000 times.
Wow.
It's got no stars in it. It's got nobody in it but him and friends of his. It's it's a dramatic movie. It's very small. I don't think there was any budget to it whatsoever. So for anybody at home who wants to make something and it's small, it's build the wall level, it can get out there and people can respond to it. It's not a movie that would ever have gotten picked up by Sundance or even South by Southwest or anything, but people are still out there clamoring for this kind of stuff, even if the demand isn't being met. So I would say make your Build the Wall, make your Pretend That You Love Me, make your, you know, kind of movies that I make. It will get out there. It will find an audience for sure. Because once that kind of dam bursts, I think people are going to realize that things like YouTube can be avenues for exploring smaller films and, you know, the kind of indie films that people miss, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are very few more exciting moments than watching a film from a filmmaker you've never heard of with actors you've never seen before that really blows your mind. You know, I mean, that's just the best. And so I think there's always a hungry audience for that. There's just challenges in distribution and promotion and things like that. But yeah, the ability to upload an entire feature film and screen it for free is just an incredibly powerful tool for filmmakers. In the old days, and by the old days, I even mean when I was starting out, you know, you just literally could not do that. You know, there was no such thing as YouTube in 2005 when I made my first feature. So I was burning DVDs, having to go to the post office and mail them to people, whoever wanted to check it out. It sort of cost me like $5 every time I wanted to share my movie with someone. the idea that a global audience could watch a film instantly is just incredible.
Yeah, one of my movies, I made a movie called Attack of the Giant Blurry Finger that I made with my girlfriend Chloe, where it's literally just my blurry finger in front of the lens chasing her around the house and whatnot. It's just as simple as that, and that for like 60 minutes or whatever. It became really big in Indonesia, and Brazilians really love it too. And like, it's just, they just get a kick out of it. And that's something that, I never could have anticipated. And I never knew would happen. And it literally happened just by me putting it on Amazon Prime Video myself, and then it getting pirated and bootlegged throughout, Brazil and Indonesia and whatnot. They just love it for some reason.
That's so funny.
There's always an audience out there for sure. So we always finish out the same way. That's stupid questions. Can I ask you a couple stupid questions before we go?
Absolutely.
All right, first stupid question. This is kind of a pitch, actually. It's a question, but it's also a pitch. You're familiar with Sharknado, right?
Yes.
There's also a movie called Lavantula, which is lava and tarantula and whatnot.
Okay.
Do you know about that one?
No, I have not heard of that one.
It exists. All right. So my pitch to you is Swanberg. It's an iceberg that's just full of swans, and as it melts, the swans kind of escape and attack people. I think that should be your next movie, Swanberg.
I like it.
Yeah. All right. Second stupid question. We talked about Ken Osborne. I have a weird fan theory with Ken Osborne and your movies.
Okay.
When we first see Ken Osborne's penis in Hannah Takes the Stairs, it's at its I'm not gonna say small, but it's at its least full. As your movies progress, it seems like his penis kind of fills up a little bit more along the way until Build the Wall, where he has like just a full erection.
Wow, I love this.
Was that something conscious? Did you notice this? Was this a discussion? It's a solid trajectory throughout your filmmaking career where it just gets slowly more full, bigger and bigger until full-blown erection.
I'm nervous now because this theory implies there's nowhere left to go. We've already taken it all the way. I hope Build the Wall is not the end of the Kent Osborne line. I love this theory. I have not noticed it. It certainly was not intentional, though I will say that when we shot the scene in Hannah Takes the Stairs where Kent and Greta are in the bathtub, he was very nervous that his penis was not being well represented, just that he felt like I was capturing it at its worst. He probably, I think on the Hannah Takes the Stairs DVD, me, Kent, and Greta did commentary. I'm sure he talks about it himself. But so maybe subconsciously since then, I have been trying to make it up to him or something by giving the audience a chance to see his penis in many lights to form their own opinion about it.
I think that's great. I think I think representation matters, in cinema. And I'm glad you're showing us all the the whole spectrum of what he has in his pants and all of that.
Also, on my streaming service, I did a short for Funny or Die back in the day that Kent is in, which I believe it's blurred out, but in the video, Kent plays like a stunt penis for a CGI heavy sequence in which the mainstream Hollywood actors don't want to do real penetration, so their scenes are like computer generated, and Kent is the stunt penis. So there's clearly some fixation that I haven't fully acknowledged or wrapped my head around.
Well, it's a very funny short. It's funny because the thumbnail for it is unblurred, and then the actual short itself is like fully blurred.
Yeah, that's because the thumbnail, I dug up the thumbnail on some hard drive, which was obviously taken by someone else at a different time. So,
well, that and much more on JoesSwanbergcom. It's basically your own little streaming channel, which is awesome. I'll probably set up one for myself too. It seems like the site you set it up with is really awesome.
Yeah, these guys, Special.tv is who they're called, and They're based out of Montana, and as far as I can tell, it's a real small organization. Really cool guys. I've had a few phone calls with them, and so far so good. So I would definitely recommend them at this point, and it's been very easy to set my thing up. So if any filmmakers are pondering it, within a very short amount of time, you can be up and running.
And I would recommend everybody, pay the $5 or the $50 for a year or whatever it is. Watch all these movies. I'm on the Frank V. Ross stuff now. I've watched like 3 of those. I've been enjoying myself there.
Cool.
Those are films I never would have found otherwise, which is great. I love when I come across stuff like that. And Joe Swanberg, great talking to you, man. Yeah,
you too. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I just love that there is still a thriving community of independent filmmakers. I think it keeps getting stronger, and the tools available to us keep advancing in ways that are so far, pretty awesome. I mean, they just allow people like you and I to know each other, which is already great. We live in different cities. We've never met in real life, and yet we can share work and talk about the struggles, so I love it.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, man.
All right. You too. Talk to you later.
Thank you all for listening. And like I said before, if you like the show, killthelionfilms.com, $2 per month. That's all it takes. You support the show. You support the studio as well. You help us make movies. Thank you all for listening. See you soon.